This conference will now be recorded.
I'd like to showcase the code of ethics that we as ASHRAE as ASHRAE members operate under. Just a second, please. So here is the ASHRAE code of ethics. Yeah, here is the ASHRAE code of ethics, as you can see. These are the rules and guidelines that we operate under. And now I'd like to So now I would like to begin by introducing to you all our agenda that we have today. Firstly, we have a representative from the Trinidad Green Building Code, and that is, just a second, please, Mr. Devanan Ragbir. Engineer Devanan Ragbir is a professional mechanical engineer and a lead AP. He has been in the construction industry for 20 years as an MP, design engineer, and project manager. Mr. Ragbir is an advocate for green building awareness and one of the founders of the Trinidad and Tobago Green Building Council in 2010. He has served under several committees, including the National Building Code of Trinidad and Tobago and the ESCO committee in the Ministry of Energy. He has done numerous presentations and lectures on green building to local stakeholders and professionals of TNT in an attempt to create a paradigm shift in the country's approach towards the construction and operations of green buildings. I'd like to know, just before we start, any questions that you have, you can type in the chat. It's right next to the participations. So just demonstrating. So any questions that you may have for the presenters, we will now transmit towards the in the chat. I'd like for you now to send you over to Mr. Devanan Ragbir. Mr. Devanan, I'm not sure if you know, but mic, just switch on your mic, please, if you have your mic too.
Okay, yeah, I'm there.
Yeah, you're there.
All right, let me just start back. Well, thank you, President Mohammed, for the introduction. Pleasant afternoon to ASHRAE Trinidad Student Branch and all other attendees of this webinar. On behalf of Trinidad and Tobago Green Building Council, I'll be doing a presentation on green buildings and how it assists with climate change mitigation. A brief on Trinidad and Tobago Green Building Council. It was founded in 2010. It's a member-driven organization. It's a significant advocate for sustainable building design in Trinidad and Tobago. And our basic mission is to transform the way Trinidad and Tobago buildings and communities are built, designed, and operated to enable a good working environment and being socially responsible to improve the quality of life. I will now start my presentation. Right, since we are dealing with climate change, we'll have to understand what the definition of climate change. I know everyone has a definition. This definition was taken from United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Climate change refers to a change in the state of climate that can be identified by changes in the mean and or the variability of its properties, and that persists for an extended period, typically decades or longer. It refers to any change in climate over time, whether due to natural variability or as a result of human activity. I think the world is concentrating on human activity at the moment because that's what we have control of. Climate change can be caused by natural occurrences, examples, solar outputs, orbital shifts, volcanic activities, continental drifts, amongst a few natural occurrences, and human activities by greenhouse gases we emit, the use of fossil fuels, deforestation, urbanization, which are the major few that affects us and contribute towards climate change. On your right of this slide, you would have seen I've inserted a competition that Trinidad and Tobago Green Building Council had a couple of years ago on the climate change challenge. It was open to all secondary schools to do a presentation on how buildings affect climate change. So I thought I would show that TTGBC has been engaged in working towards people being educated and has been an advocate of climate change. All right. To understand green buildings better, I decided to look at the local context of green buildings. The first green building in Trinidad and Tobago is Savannah East. It's located around the Queen's Park Savannah and it's east of the Savannah, hence the name Savannah East. It's certified LEED Silver. LEED is an international accreditation body that certifies green buildings. I was fortunate enough to be the green building consultant on this project. So as I go through the slide, you might hear me referring to we, meaning that I actually was part of the project and sometimes refer to the project itself. Some of the sustainable features on this building, which is associated at the end of the day to mitigate climate change, is that the building had reduced energy consumption, it had a reduced water consumption, it was located on a sustainable site, it had reduced transportation requirements to reach the site, and the building was mostly composed of sustainable materials, and recycling was practiced during construction and the current operation of the building. So I'll go into detail into the strategies and show you the output and how it gears towards climate change mitigation. On Savannah East, with regards to energy consumption, annual energy usage is 863,000 kilowatt hours. The annual renewable energy generation is 37,000 kilowatt hour. So therefore, that means we have a photovoltaic system on your roof. Due to design and construction, we were able to achieve a net energy efficiency of 23.6% over a conventional building. The conventional building performance was the baseline on ASHRAE 2010. So therefore, we're performing pretty good on that building in regards to energy. Some of these strategies that those utilize to achieve this level of energy efficiency they utilize an insulated building envelope. The roof was a concrete roof with 3 inches polyiso boards, and then we actually had soil in order to make it a green roof. So therefore they had some landscaping up on the roof. The walls were insulated with several layers of R8 insulation, and the windows were double glazed with low E values. The installer energy efficient VAC system design utilized variable flow refrigerant system with some enthalpy wheels on the roof. Utilize LED lighting and lighting controls. They utilize daylight sensors, which would shut off lights where daylight was prevalent. The architect laid out the building in an east-west orientation, so therefore the envelope faces on the east and west were the smaller faces of the building. We did energy modeling at the design stage, so we know how the building would perform before it was actually built. When the construction was complete, they commissioned all the MEPF equipment and systems in order to attain the performance criteria which was set in the energy modeling. Alternative energy was a 20 kilowatt rooftop photovoltaic system. There's a building management system that oversees the building operation, and we meter the electrical consumption. We had a lot of sub-metering, and because in order to understand energy consumption, you need to measure, and from measure, then you can evaluate performance. And obviously, the mitigation, climate change mitigation strategy is you reduce electricity consumption, so therefore you reduce the use of fossil fuels. Buildings on a whole account for around 40% of total fossil fuel usage. Besides the power that energizes the building, there's a lot of carbon footprint associated with getting to the building and leaving the building via transportation. Construction in the building has a fair amount of carbon footprint associated with it, and the manufacturing industry that support buildings has a fair amount of carbon footprint associated with it. So that's how the 40% of total fossil fuels usage came about. Our next slide touches on reduction in water consumption. The building water efficiency by fixed years was 20% over the conventional building. Conventional building was based on the EPA Act in the US, and they utilized alternative water, which accounted for 20% of the water consumption in the building. We have the strategies by utilizing low flow water fixtures. The alternative water, we utilized rainwater for flushing of toilets during the rainy season. We utilized condensate water, which was generated from the AC system. All our condensate water irrigates the plant twice a day. It has a building management system. Again, you have to meter in order to evaluate performance. Climate change strategy on this, how it assists with climate change mitigation, is that there's a lot of energy spent out in processing water to make it potable, for delivering the potable water, and also there's a lot of energy associated with wastewater treatment plants. So by reducing the demand and the outflow of waste into the plants, you would thereby go ahead and reduce power consumption and energy. So you have a relationship with fossil fuels there. Just two little pictures on there advising what is high efficiency toilets. And the next slide basically shows you water usage 1999 compared to 2016 in the US. And you would see one of the major users of water is toilets and well, urinals by extension. Savannah East was situated in a sustainable site. That means it was located in an already developed urban area and was close to essential services. When it's located in an urban area, all the necessary infrastructure is there: water, sewer, electrical, telecommunication, stormwater. Because everyone will know in the construction industry, these things has a high carbon footprint because of the construction that has to be done in order to bring all these infrastructure to a site. Savannah East is close to essential services, hospital, restaurants, parks, schools, public transport. So therefore, the carbon footprint associated with transportation to get to essential services is significantly reduced. Mitigation strategy is climate change mitigation strategy is a reduction in developing and constructing virgin spaces. Green building is not a building that you would find in the middle of the forest, or you'll find in a reserve. A green building is a building that will not adversely impact the environment. It will not go and interfere with virgin territory. It will be more in urban areas. That's a common misconception people have about green building. I touched on transportation on sustainable side. Savannah East is located in an urban area. Close proximity to existing transport systems. So if you look at the map that is there, you'll see Savannah East, and then you'll see how close it is to all the transportation hubs. There's actually bus stops on both sides of Savannah East, which facilitate easy access to the public transportation system. Right? We have preferred parking in the building. So people who carpool, who have hybrid vehicles, electric vehicles, they park closer to the entrance center of the building. You'll notice though the parking that's not on the ground, that's above ground, is open grid paving. There's also some car lifts, which encourages utilizing the building footprint with using the building footprint without increasing gross square footage. Well, the climate change mitigation strategy again is a reduction in emissions associated with transportation. On the building itself, we utilize sustainable materials and practice recycling. So we source materials from sustainable sites, and we recycle construction material and recycle building operation waste. So our strategies for sustainable material was we source wooden materials from FSC certified products. FSC certified is Forest Stewardship Council, which is basically certified forest, sustainable forest. Sustainable forest means forest that is replanted every 15 years. The trees mature within 10 to 15 years. So therefore, after you remove the trees, you replant. So again, 15 years time, you'll have mature trees to reap. Regional materials were sourced. So therefore, the carbon footprint associated with imported materials was significantly reduced. Plenty materials had a recycled content. Example, steel usually have 70 to 90% recycled content. Wood, certain desks from steel keys had recycled content in it. And during construction, we recycle. And again, I mentioned building operational waste. Obviously, the climate change mitigation strategy is that with the sustainable forest, which gives you mature plants in 15 years, and then you replant, deforestation on sustainable forests does not occur. Regional materials, obviously, we reduce emissions associated with transportation of materials to the site. And recycling during construction and operation of the building with items such as paper, metals, concrete, woods, etc. will reduce the demand on virgin forests, virgin landscape, reduce the demand on mining, and also the manufacturing of new materials. A lot of energy is associated with extraction and processing of raw materials and resources. So therefore, when you utilize sustainable materials, you reduce all the carbon footprint associated with the extractions. So that's a brief on Savannah East, which is a green belt in Trinidad, and the strategies that we utilize and how it contributes towards climate change mitigation. So where are we in Trinidad? With regards to green buildings, there are two certified green buildings in Trinidad. One is Savannah East, which I gave a brief description of, and the next one is NIB building, which is in fact maybe like 4 billions before Savannah East. The state had issued some tenders for green billions, but however, due to the status of the economy, none of the projects went forward to date. But we must take note that a lot of buildings in Trinidad do utilize sustainable strategies with energy efficient equipment. They do have a lot of daylighting sensors. They have utilizing LEDs, which is pretty common with new construction. So although we don't have certified green buildings, there are a lot of buildings that practice green strategies, and TTGBC applaud all those buildings for those strategies. What are the challenges for green building in Trinidad? We all know the low energy costs associated with provision of power in Trinidad. We have a lot of cheap, inefficient equipment in Trinidad and Tobago market because it's not acceptable in the first world. In Trinidad, there's no real stimulus package for climate change or green initiatives. And the little initiatives that are available are very difficult to access. A couple of years ago, a colleague of mine brought down a container filled with solar water heaters. However, customs was not up to date with the incentives. He spent 2 weeks on the port, accumulated a huge amount of storage fees, and he had to effectively reroute the container to Guyana in order to not lose more money. And the basic thing in Trinidad is that Trinidad economy is based on fossil fuels. So it's kind of hard and difficult to move away from it. But the way forward is by reducing the demand for the fossil fuels, and that's what green building does. And once the demand is not there, and we seek alternative ways to fossil fuels, we will slowly get there in order to try to save in order to mitigate against climate change. The way forward is education, discussions, forums, lobbying, some protests, following codes. I mean, I know my colleague, Ms. Andia, who's the next speaker, will mention about Quebec, Caribbean Regional Building Efficiency Code. They need some policy change in Trinidad, and what each and every one of us has to do as the lead and try to transform the society to think more about climate change and learn to do development that will have little or no effect on the environment. So I'd like to thank everyone for lending me your ear to this small presentation that I did. On behalf of Trinidad and Tobago Green Building Council, I extend courtesies to everyone, and I'd like to pass back to the administrator. Thank you.
Okay, wow, what a presentation. Thank you so much, Mr. Devanan. What an interesting way, and hopefully Trinidad and Tobago can move forward in this green building initiative. I personally think it's fantastic what you guys are doing, and hopefully it can be the standard for buildings in the near future for Trinidad and Tobago and the rest of the world, hopefully. Moving forward now, I would like to introduce the next speaker, passionate about quality and standards. Ms. Andia Prasad Maharaj has been employed at the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards for over 7 years. During this time, she has had the privilege to work on national, regional, and international standardization projects. She has recently been appointed Trinidad and Tobago's representative at the Technical Management Committee at the CARICOM Regional Organization for Standardization and Quality, and holds a BSc in Mechanical and Manufacturing Engineering and is an accredited international trade specialist. So I'd like to move you forward now to Ms. Andia. Again, Miss Andia, anytime you're ready, please unmute your mic and you can speak.
Okay, sorry about that. So I was speaking and you weren't hearing me. So let me try back again. So are you able to see my screen with the presentation now?
Yes, everything's fine.
Okay, all right. So good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm here to talk to you about how standards can support climate change and not climate change, but climate mitigation and climate action. Okay, so before I start my presentation, I always like to take a step back and talk about the science of quality, because it's something most persons usually assume just happen or aren't aware about the various disciplines that go in to creating a quality product. One of the best examples is that of the LED light bulb. So where there's this push to have more energy efficient buildings and infrastructure, I can assume one of the first things most of us would have done was go out and buy an LED light bulb, change the incandescent bulbs to LED light bulb, and voila, our building is suddenly more energy efficient. But in buying the LED light bulb, we would have made certain assumptions. One, you would have assumed that the bulb would have worked. You would have assumed that the bulb will fit into your existing light socket. And you would have assumed on the packet where it says will last 10 years or 1,500 hours, that the bulb will actually last that length of time. And now that I'm bringing up these assumptions, you're probably thinking, well, I assume somebody would have been checking these things and thought about the design of the bulb when it was coming into place. And these are some of the considerations that go into creating a quality product or quality service. So the first thing being standards. Right? So standards by nature would have dealt with the performance characteristics of in this case, the LED light bulb, and would have looked at things such as interoperability to make sure that when we were creating this new design, it will fit in with existing infrastructure. So you didn't have to go out and change all your light sockets. Also, standards would have looked at test methods. So we're not only designing criteria for the product, but also designing tests to make sure that the product meets the criteria that we've specified. The next item we look at is metrology. Now, first up, metrology isn't about the weather. That's meteorology. And it's not about metals either. That's metallurgy. Metrology deals with the science of measurement. So by using the LED light bulb, one of the things you would have expected then would be your energy usage to drop or to have a smaller light bill. And this affects then your metering systems. So we have to make sure that one, that the calibration and of our measurement devices are up to mark and are being monitored. And this happens through metrology. Conformity assessment. Now, these activities involve testing, certification, inspection, and market surveillance. And this comes into the activities where we're assuming somebody's checking the product to make sure it meets the requirements and is performing as advertised. So if you look on the bulb, you'll probably see a circle with a UL on it, or probably when you buy electrical products, you'll see the symbol with C and E on it. These are certification marks, which means that the product has been tested and certified to meet standards. And this gives the consumers assurance that the product meets a certain level of quality and performance characteristics. Beyond that, there's inspection, where we can have persons actually going out into the marketplace and pulling products and doing market surveillance to check to see that it's actually meeting the performance claims that it is being advertised for. And all of these activities are designed to create a better product and a safer environment for us consumers. And lastly, the last part of quality I'm going to talk about is accreditation. Now, with COVID-19, you probably are hearing this word more and more in the media discussions. For example, CARICOM is our accredited lab for doing COVID-19 tests. This means then that someone is checking the organization that's doing the test to make sure that they're performing the test properly, that they're meeting international or regional or national standards, and that they're following procedures. Accreditation allows us to say, okay, the products are demonstrating quality, but it also looks at then the conformity assessment activities to ensure that they themselves are meeting applicable international requirements. So that way we have a full circular approach at creating a better product while at the same time ensuring that the services are also up to mark. Okay, so what I'm now going to talk about is the national and regional standards bodies. For Trinidad and Tobago, these activities of standards development, certification, conformity assessment, metrology, and accreditation, they all fall under the ambit of the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards. But notably, we aren't the only ones responsible for standards development and certification. Certification can seem as a commercial activity, so there are other organizations which offer it. But regards to standards, per the Standards Act, we are the only organization that has the ability to call a standard a national Trinidad and Tobago standard. But there are some legislations which have other organizations with the ability to develop standards, such as the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, as well as if you look at WASA's legislation, they also have the mandate to develop the plumbing code. In these cases, the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards works with organizations or ministries to make sure when we're creating these standards that it's meeting international best practices as well as our obligations at the World Trade Organization. Okay, so just to give an overview of TTBS, as I mentioned, we do standards implementation, which is our inspection activities, certification, metrology, and calibration services. Regionally, our counterpart is the CARICOM Regional Organization for Standards and Quality, CROSQ. So this is what I like to consider sort of the UN of national standards bodies in the CARICOM region. So similarly how TTBS is the national standards body of Trinidad and Tobago, each CARICOM member state also has a national standards body. And what we do, we come collectively at CROSQ to come forward for ways for moving our regional standards and regional quality initiatives. And this is held by CROSQ. Okay. Right. So, getting a bit of the background, let's start to talk about standards. A standard, as defined by ISO, the International Standardization Organization, is a document established by consensus, approved by a recognized body that provides for common and repeated use, rules, guidelines, characteristics for products, materials, processes, service, or systems. So it's important to note then standards can function for both tangible and intangible products. So that's why we often say that products and services are interchangeable for standards because we're able to define requirements for both of them. Notably, one of the things you see is a document established by consensus. So I have a colleague at the British Standards Institute, BSI, who often describes standards development as magic because it's really an avenue where you have regulators, industry players, consumer advocates, all coming together collectively and deciding requirements, the minimum acceptable requirements for a product to make it safe and have minimum performance abilities. And that's not something that normally happens, where you have regulators and industry and consumer advocates all agreeing on something going forward. But it happens with standards, and it happens quite a lot. So that's why we say it's developed by consensus, which means there's lack of sustained objection, but it's normally agreement going forward. We can't go forward with the requirements unless we have that agreement amongst our stakeholders. In terms of when we say it's approved by a recognized body, for Trinidad and Tobago, and national standards, because the document can be referenced by legislation or contracts, our national standards has to be recognized by the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards or developed by us. Okay. Per our legislation, there are two types of standards, voluntary and compulsory. And normally when I start to talk about this, the first question I always get is, well, why do you have voluntary standards? Nobody's going to follow it anyway. All standards should be compulsory. And I often link the argument to sort of the your kitchen sink. So most wives, or you probably might get this from your mom, is your mom will tell you, wash the dishes. And you grumble and you go ahead and you wash it. And then you tell her, okay, I washed it because you told me to wash it. And she will reply, I don't want you to wash it because I told you to. I want you to do it because you saw the dirty dishes and you wanted to wash it. It's sort of the similar comparison here. By applying standards voluntarily, it shows that the industry is maturing to recognize that there are minimum requirements for their products and they have voluntarily chosen to meet it. But at the same time, there's recognition that there are certain health and safety risks associated with products. And in that case, the government and TTBS steps in where we have compulsory or regulatory requirements. Per the Standards Act, we are only allowed to make compulsory standards for products that can impact the health, safety of users, or the environment. But I do want to note that a voluntary standard can become enforceable if it's referenced in a contractual agreement between two companies, because then it becomes a legally binding document between these two organizations. Okay, so if you've never seen a Trinidad and Tobago standard, here's a good one to look at. It helps us with our alternate sources of energy. This is the CNG standard. But let's take a little step look deeper into the document and to see a little recap of some of the things I've been talking about. So as mentioned, there are various types of standards. With regards to our conversations, there are national, regional, and international standards, as well as private or industry standards. So, such as Coca-Cola has the infamous standards for the quality of its products. That would be a private or industry standard. Standards can be developed, adopted, or modified. So what you'll see is internationally, many times countries would experience the same problems. So if we're developing a standard to address a problem, we normally check to see if one is existing internationally. If it is, we can adopt it full scale, or we might have to modify it to meet the requirements such as the climate conditions, our regulatory requirements, and make it suitable for Trinidad and Tobago. If there's not one existing already, we normally would do it as a develop from scratch. And then once we publish it and put it out there, other countries can look to our standards to see if they encounter the same problem, maybe they would like to adopt or do a modified adoption of the standard. To make sure the documents are still relevant to industry, we have a revision cycle. Currently, our revision cycle for national standards is 3 to 5 years, but we are having some discussions to see how we address this part, if we want to keep it as a fixed period or go based on a need for it. As we would have just discussed, standards can either be voluntary or compulsory. And we, the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau Standards, are legislatively bound by the Standards Act number 18 of 1997 and the Metrology Act number 18 of 2004. And standards can cover a wide range of products, including product service requirements, test methods, terminology, and classification or grading. With regards to the standards development process, it's very collaborative with stakeholders. So once a need has been identified that a standard should be, there's a problem in the industry and maybe a standard might be able to address it, we identify the needs, stakeholders or ministries might contact us about the problem, and then from there we will start to do some research on it via technical and market research. And first thing we'll be looking at, is the standard the solution to the problem? Because sometimes we're not always the solution for the problem. As well as we look at do some benchmarking internationally and regionally to see what exists there and probably how those problems have been resolved. From there, if we make the decision to go ahead with a standard, we will prepare a working draft, and these are the committee managers at TTBS. Once there, we will establish what we call a specification committee, technical committees, or technical working groups. And these persons, as I would have mentioned, are representative of regulators, ministry bodies, industry representative, consumer advocates. It can also include learning institutions such as university and UTT, such as UE and UTT. And what we will do as a committee, we will go through the draft documents and sort of interrogate it, see where it can work, where it doesn't work, and have these sort of discussions to see, okay, and identify the requirements that this is suitable for Trinidad and Tobago. From there, we go to public comment. And this is a legal requirement as well as its international practice. So it allows then not just the small grouping of stakeholders we had in the specification committee, but also a wider grouping of Trinidad and Tobago, and all the stakeholders have a chance now to review the document and give us their comments. We are legally mandated to issue all standards, both voluntary and compulsory, for a period of 60 days. After which, the committee will reconvene and we will review any of the comments we received and determine if it's necessary to update the document or not. From there, we enter TTBS's approval process for standards, which includes submission to our technical and marketing committee, and then to our board of directors. Once we have approval at that phase, we will now issue the standard for publication, and it can be used by the industry or regulators as the case may need. Okay. Now, regards to sustainable energy and standards to support climate change, we have a number of existing national standards here. So what you'll see is standards for renewable energy, interconnectivity, and transportation. So what we have is standards that will support the entire system. So we have solar water heaters and interconnectivity standards for when TNTech and RIC are able and willing to change the legislation. Well, we have the standards there to support it. And from transportation, as you would have seen, we have the CNG standard, as well as we are looking at working on standards right now for electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging stations. Okay, so you would see in our upcoming standards for up next 3 years, we have the national adoption of the CARICOM Regional Energy Efficiency Building Code. We are revising our compulsory standards on CFLs and LEDs. And as I mentioned just now, we are working on electric vehicles, the charging stations. In the next coming years, there have been regional standards for energy efficiency labeling of LED light bulbs, refrigerators and appliances, and air conditioners. And we will be proceeding with the national adoption of these standards. Coming out of these adoptions, you will start to see a CARICOM regional energy efficiency label on these products. So you might be familiar with the Energy Star on American appliances. Well, soon you'll be seeing a CARICOM energy efficiency label on it. And that means when you go as a consumer, go to the grocery or whichever place to purchase these products, you can then do a comparison to see which ones are more energy efficient. And it's going to be for the requirements and conditions of Trinidad and Tobago. So you know that, okay, if it says it's going to save you $100, it has been tested according to our conditions to ensure that, yes, it is $100 for TT that you're going to be saving. And for the remaining standards for 2021 and 2022, it's the electric vehicles and auxiliary safety systems. Okay. So, as I mentioned, we have the energy efficiency labeling standards coming up, and we are also developing the testing infrastructure for it. So, Trinidad and Tobago, through TTBS, is going to be the center of excellence for testing for CFLs and LEDs, and we are in the process of finalizing our laboratory to test it. So, on the left, you will be seeing the lighting racks to testing the performance of the bulbs, as well as some of our old infrastructure for testing the bulbs as well. We will be getting a new equipment for there shortly. It should have been in about 10 weeks, but with COVID, we might have some delays, but it is coming on stream sometime this year. Okay. If you want to check out more of our standards, you can feel free to check out our standards database, which is available on our website. So it'll give you a full catalog of all the available national standards. You can view it based on voluntary or compulsory or by topic. Okay, so ASHRAE CARICOM has asked me to talk a little bit about the CARICOM Regional Energy Efficiency Building Code. And as mentioned earlier, probably in the introductions, Mr. Devanand Ragbear, who was the previous speaker, served as chairman for our Regional Technical Working Group. So the CREEBC is what we like to consider the gold star of standards. It's internationally aligned because it's based on requirements of ICC, the International Code Council, International Energy Conservation Code 2018 edition. It's regionally developed because all the CARICOM member states came together to review that document and see how to make it more suitable for the CARICOM region, and national collaboration, because as part of the regional development process, our TTBS and our stakeholders and technical working groups would have liaised to see where those requirements, proposed requirements, can work for Trinidad and Tobago and where we need to make adjustments. There is a view-only version of the document available. You can check it out on the website linked directly underneath the code, http://codes.iccsafe.org. Okay, so to give some background of the history of the CREEBC, CARICOM as a region recognized that we were particularly susceptible to fluctuating oil prices. So we started having discussions on creating a more energy efficient and energy conservation practices within the region. And out of those discussions, it was recognized that we needed to develop a regional energy policy. Based on this recognition, a CARICOM Energy Unit was established with a mandate to develop the policy and implement strategies for it. At the 41st Quartet meeting in 2013, Quartet is the Council for Trade and Economic Directors. So that would be, if it's the energy meeting, it will be all the ministers of energy for the various CARICOM member states would have met together and given approval for the development of a regional energy efficiency building code. As CROSCU, as our regional standards body, they were given a mandate to ensure that this project took on. From there, the project would have formally launched in 2017, and by the end of 2018, we'd have completed the CREEBC, and it was published in 2019. Okay. To give a full idea of the region participating, I have a diagram here with all the various member states who would have contributed towards the development of this document. The regional project team, the RPT, was chaired by Dr. Churchill Norbert and hosted by Jamaica. For our Trinidad Technical Working Group, as mentioned, Mr. Devanand Ragbir was the chair of the committee. I have the members here listed. As you can see, we have representatives from learning institutions, government, Ministry of Energy, Government Electrical Inspectorate, as well as various stakeholders such as ENCO and experts there. Okay. So the code itself is designed to be applicable to both residential and commercial buildings. And as you would expect, it looks at the entire building structure. So there are mechanical and electrical requirements, as well as requirements dealing with building material and construction practices, because all these things can add up to creating the reduction in the energy usage of a building. As well as, most importantly, we like to consider the maintenance practices of it. So Professor Kochar at UE, when I was there, he would always talk about the importance of building commissioning and maintenance, because the best designed systems over time will start to develop faults and not perform as designed. So the maintenance helps us to ensure that the building continues to perform as we expect it to, and is not starting to use more energy than it was designed for. As well as we have also recommendations for construction inspection approval systems. So to give an idea of the code overview, as mentioned, we have requirements for commercial buildings and residential buildings. And as you can see, they sort of mirror one another. The CREEBC is scoped for new buildings. Or if you're going to do attachments to an existing building, the attachment can also fall under the scope of the CREEBC. There are some requirements for existing buildings if you want to look at that point, but initially most of the codes will apply for new building infrastructures. In designing the code, we would have looked at various options of compliance. For commercial buildings, there's a prescriptive approach. So throughout the codes, certain requirements would have been identified as mandatory. And if you fulfill all those requirements, we would have said you've taken the prescriptive route. Another route would say if you are compliant with ASHRAE 90.1. If you meet the requirements of ASHRAE 90.1, you're considered to meet the requirements of the CREEBC. And the third option is performance. So where your annual energy cost is lower than the reference designed. Similarly, for residential buildings, there's a prescriptive and performance approach. What we would have introduced is a tropical buildings. So this was one of the major changes we would have made in developing the CREEBC, which would have been given considerations for the design of buildings in the Caribbean, such as ventilation, or if your building does not have AC throughout it and there's certain ventilation to allow for it, it would be considered to have complied with the CREEBC. Okay, but we're not just stopping there. Because codes can be very complex and difficult to understand, we are having discussions with ICC to produce supporting documents. So we have the user guides and study companions to ensure that manufacturers or installers fully understand the requirements of the document and can use it going forward. Regards to nationally, with the publication of the CREEBC, we will now start the national adoption. So we've established a technical working group to look back at the code itself and just to make sure that there's any tweaks we need to make it, to make sure that's suitable for Trinidad and Tobago. And we're lucky enough to have that most of the representatives who would have participated in the regional project would have been willing to participate for the national adoption. We are currently identifying the modifications to make it for Trinidad and Tobago, and we expect to finish this in about the next 1 to 2 meetings. From there, it will be issued for public comment for a period of 60 days. Okay? So if you are interested in learning anything more about standards or to see any of the standards that we have issued for public comment, you can visit us on our website or check us out on any of our social media pages. Especially with COVID-19, we've got some infographics out about some of the requirements to look for the labeling of products, particularly the disinfectant ones, to make sure what you're buying is something that's going to perform as you intended to. Okay, so thank you everyone. That's my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Anya. That was a nice presentation, very detailed on standards, which standards have to be detailed, so understandable. And as young engineers, we must try to maintain standards as much as possible. Our next presenter is someone who's extremely distinguished. Hopefully my CV can look as well as good as he does. Just give me a little background on it. Dr. Tom Lawrence is a mechanical engineering program lead with the University of Georgia and has 35 plus years of professional experience. After spending 18 years in the industry, he went back for his PhD and has been at the University of Georgia since January 2004. He's the past chair of the ASHRAE Technical Committee 2.8 and is a member of the committee that wrote and maintains the ASHRAE standard 189.1 for high-performance green buildings. As an ASHRAE distinguished lecturer, he gives seminars at venues around the world. Dr. Lawrence was named an ASHRAE Fellow in 2016 and was a Director at Large for ASHRAE from 2016 to 2019. Dr. Lawrence has a BS with the highest distinction in environmental science from Purdue University, an MS degree in mechanical engineering from Oregon State University, and a second MS degree in engineering management from the Washington University. He has also received his PhD from Purdue University in the spring of 2004, and he's going to give us a presentation on high performance building design and what ASHRAE's position is. So please welcome Dr. Tom Lawrence.
Okay, can everybody hear me okay? You hear me okay?
Yes, you're fine. Yeah. You're fine
Okay,
to go
perfect.
ahead.
I will do my best to try to catch us back on schedule because we're about 15 minutes behind here now. So everybody can see that okay. We'll go forward. And I'm taking part of one of my normal ASHRAE Distinguished Lecture talks on high performance buildings and adding little thoughts on ASHRAE's position on climate change to put along the theme of this particular conference here or the session today. Like to encourage everybody, since this is primarily student memberships, ASHRAE has a lot of opportunities to work out for you. So get involved with your local chapters and help out with that. So I'll go through a little bit on what the ASHRAE's climate change position document's about. We'll talk about the definition of what a high performance building is. And we used to use the term a green building and sustainable building design, but high performance building seems to be the one that the industry is trending towards. And then they'll go through a few topics and issues that I see are coming down their way. There might be some future trends that would become more and more important in the overall designs. I've had the opportunity over the last 10 to 15 years to travel around to a lot of different places for ASHRAE. As you can kind of see on this map right here, I might be able to add another little star, I guess. It didn't visit you, but at least it's by remote on there. And so one of the things that was shown about that is there's the topic is the same. The idea of a high performance buildings and then climate change, that's important everywhere. Everywhere you see a star on there, that's something an important topic to talk about. So I want to spend a few minutes now going through and talking about ASHRAE's climate change position document. See the web link on there. I don't think we have time to go to that point. You can Google it and find it very quickly at that point. It's not that terribly long. Somewhere in the 10-12 page length time frame. Position documents that ASHRAE produces, or what ASHRAE as a society says what we think that our position should be, or what society's position should be, and especially relative to items or topics that are related to HVAC and our topics right there. So some key point summary of what's contained in that position document. We recognize that our industry, the HVAC and refrigeration industry, contribute to greenhouse gas emissions directly through refrigerants, refrigerants that are released in the process of the manufacturing and operation of equipment, and also, probably more so with easier to relate to is indirectly through the CO2 emissions that are associated with energy consumption, primarily electrical, but it also could be combustion of, say, natural gas or something like that for producing, some energy that's used in the building systems. So therefore, ASHRAE does have a potential for a significant contribution to mitigate and adapt there. Roughly 20% of the total societal emissions of CO2 is through HVAC systems connected with buildings. So we are heavily involved in that. So ASHRAE is taking a leadership role in the response to climate change and how we adapt to that point. Some of the things we talk about, this is contained in the position document, although wasn't something that was produced by ASHRAE. If we look at this, the vertical axis is basically the cost in terms of euros per tons of equivalent of carbon to mitigate a CO2 emission. And some of the things on there are basically, they pay for themselves. I mean, you switch over the lighting, the LED lighting, it's a no-brainer. I'm pointing out a few things in here with arrows they're directly related to HVAC systems and building energy efficiency, retrofit in residential HVAC, efficient motors, all those. And the good thing is, every one of those is something that's in the label that would be pay for itself, really. So that's something that we should do. The only impediment in making doing that is maybe the first cost, and maybe just lack of information that people might have that said, what this really can actually have a contribute toward that. Some of ASHRAE's response, depend to climate change. We've been producing advanced energy design guides for 15 plus years or so now. Those are guidelines on how you could design a building of a specific type in specific climate zones or in for your climate zone, to be more energy efficient. We started with like 30% savings and then 50%, and now ASHRAE is actually working on some net zero type buildings right there for certain building types, which is really interesting. So going through the, if you follow that, at least it gives you some guidelines. It's not a standard like we described before. It just, suggestions on things that should be considered. Also ASHRAE should consider the impact of, the extreme weather events and changing climates. And when doing the design of their, we designed the building now, it's going to be there for multiple decades. And so we should look at, what the future might be in terms of the climatic considerations that we have to work with. ASHRAE's position on this, climate change is considered probably the most challenging issue facing society right now, regardless of, what we're dealing with health concerns right there. Over in the long term, that still is the most challenge. We have a lot of opportunities that exist for our members to help mitigate that in terms of refrigerant selection, doing demand reduction, energy efficiency measures, and then also looking at adapting and adopting renewable energy into our building projects we're looking from. And so, changing climate, also means a changing design, what we're looking for. We have to future-proof our particular designs. And the members of ASHRAE and ASHRAE staff should be actively involved in helping to have some influence on policy setting, to address these issues. With the previous speaker was talking about, basically in essence setting policies that the policies are reflected in terms of the standards that are being put out. ASHRAE is committed to helping to develop, solutions toward this. They're doing a lot of collaborations with other societies, organizations, promoting use of, life cycle evaluation of the designs and products, informing designers and people and students, and then also just educating building owners on the proper operation techniques to maintain these things over the overall life cycle. And working on the idea of resilience within there. We're participating with Resilience Building Coalition and their international efforts, because we're all in this together. And besides just climate change, we have to have resilient structures to take us through that. All right, so that was kind of a real quick summary of looking at what we have in terms of the ASHRAE's position document there. I want to go through now sort of a brief overview of, this generalizations of what we might call high performance building design. And when I talk about this, many times when I go through and looking at other, talk to other chapters like this, you always have to, if you're talking about a term, define what it means. I thought about this. It was about 7 or 8 years ago. Went through, if you said the term high performance building, ask people about that. What does it mean? Well, probably the first thing everybody would come up with, say, low energy consumption, or nearly net zero. That's a high performance building. But also low water consumption. Even if we're in areas where have, lots of water resources, it still takes a lot of energy to produce and deliver water. But then also they look at it from the perspective, maybe say the building owner or developer that's building this building. For them, that building is their product. So having a high return on investment for them, maybe they would define that as high performance. And you can also switch it around and look at it from, say, you're the tenant in a building, you're leasing space for your office, for your, say, employees of your company. The performance of the occupants or, your employees, that would be the high performance aspect of that. So does it have a good indoor environment? People are happy and they're getting productive in their work done. We also look at the idea of, high performance building in terms of overall impact on the surrounding, the environment. Does it fit in with the neighborhood? You can also then look at it from the perspective of the building operations people. I mean, if you're the person that's in charge of maintaining the operation of that building, can you maintain it well? Can you, effectively do design? Does it operate correctly and doesn't cause problems to you? To you, that's high performance. So all of those right here, if you think put them together, all those combined are really what would make it, we would define a high performance building. And I would contend that it is possible to have all of those all at the same time. They are not mutually exclusive going about this. And I had a friend of mine, several years ago, we were sitting at one of the ASHRAE, probably an annual or winter meeting, we were just talking about, and he says this right here, sustainability is not sustainable unless it's cost competitive. You know, and that was, I thought, that kind of profound, meaning we're not going to see widespread adoption of these ideas until at least becomes the point where people could say they would be willing to invest in it. You know, and cost competitive doesn't necessarily mean have to be the lowest first cost, but it has to be, you know, something where the owner or the person that's in charge of doing the project say, I would be willing to invest this amount of money in this particular part of the design because I know over the long term it's going to pay off for us. So that's what I mean by cost competitive. And we always have to kind of keep that in mind when we go about this. You can't just, you know, go for the highest performance you can get, the best you can get, because sometimes, you know, they may not be willing to invest in that. Now we have different scales of performance of buildings, particularly think about from an energy, but it could also involve other things. You know, we have building codes, we have minimum codes performance, and some people think that designing the code is good enough. But really, we're trying to go in toward high performance building. There are some that push to have, you know, do the best of the best. And in reality, most of the green buildings that are around that are you know, certified according to LEED or other types of programs, you know, they're somewhere in between going about this. So green building practices have evolved over the years. We have different levels. We start with guidelines. You know, those are suggestions on how we can improve things, but they're not necessarily enforceable or enforced. We have rating systems, you know, like LEED or Green Globes or BREEAM, depends on where you're at that point. You know, they're generally voluntary. Some cases they're being used to enforce it as part of the building codes, but they're a little step above the guideline parts. And then we get into the standards, and the standards are basically documents that are written such that they can be legally enforced, basically put into the building codes, which is the lowest level down down right there, where it's actually adopted by a jurisdiction. It's meant to be enforced, and some minimum criteria that the building has to meet and go forward. Excuse me. So when we go through and look at, you know, working towards energy efficiency, you know, I really like to call it the 4 R's for going about this. And then some that have been around the industry for a while, they've heard this before, but it never hurts to see this again and remind ourselves. You know, the first thing to do, the first most efficient way of investing money in a design of a building is reducing the amount of energy required, or reducing the amount of water required, you know, just through efficiency measures. And then look for ways for potentially reusing energy recovery, ventilation energy recovery, or some systems like that. And then, only then, really, is it worthwhile looking at renewables. And so these are really the three orders of three going about this. You know, you can have much more effective use of an investment of, you know, $1 in terms of reducing energy consumption through efficiency than you might have in investing it in renewable energy. So all of this, you know, putting that together involves a rethinking of the design process. And actually, really, that probably should be, we could say that could be the first thing, but that's all part behind the scene of what we're going towards. So some of the next thing I want to do right now is just go through a brief discussion of, you know, how you might design to go into net zero. These are the wedges aspects. You know, some of them people might have seen some things similar to this doing toward carbon emissions. You know, the first one you wanted to look at, I would think, be like the building envelope, you know, because, you know, the building envelope is basically going to be there the whole time that the building exists. We can have, you know, equipment and systems, you can change them out as technology changes and get more efficient. But, you know, the building envelope, you know, the windows, you know, the insulation that might be put a part of the building, that's there forever. And then energy efficiency measures, and then look in renewables. And so in some ways, this is just sort of a continuation of what we have from the previous slides going about this. So just making a few kind of comments as going about this, you know, some common characteristics of net zero energy buildings as they're existing around the world, and efficient ventilation systems going about this, you know, and ventilation is important for both energy efficiency, but it's also as a function of, you know, getting a good indoor quality. So if you look at a high performance building, it kind of gives you two aspects of between the two things right there. And then look for methods for doing energy recovery, you know, preheating, pre-cooling of air that's coming into the buildings, or certain our systems going about this. You know, a ventilation energy recovery system, you know, that is a good opportunity, particular for types of buildings that have a lot of outdoor air requirements there. Having good, solar or renewable resource available to us. Again, these are common characteristics to buildings that actually have achieved net zero in their overall operation. And there are a number of buildings that are existing around the world that have actually, made it to that level. Net zero meaning, they're generating on site as much of energy over the annual basis as they're actually consuming. In some cases, you need some occupant buy-in. They might be a building where you're trying to take advantage of natural ventilation when, the outdoor ambient conditions are appropriate, where you can open up the windows and just get natural ventilation as opposed to mechanical right there. And also, in some cases that have been toward net zero, there have been local or mandates or at least incentives to make them net zero. And all these put it together to be a net zero building, really requires an integrated design process. Some of the future things that we see coming down, we just talked about the integrated design. It's somewhat of a not exactly mainstream yet, but that's the only way you're going to get a high performance building, I think, is doing that. Integrated design meaning, the whole team is working together. But then building information modeling, or BIM, there are products out there, software tools that basically exchanging of information back and forth. It's funny, BIM was always talked about as being like 3 years away for about 20 years, and then pretty well it's here now. It's mainstream. And I'm talking with some of my people that work in industry around there right there, and pretty much almost all their projects are now gone into using BIM. Now, some of the few things we're looking at here, this is kind of really kind of the cool stuff, the virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality as a design process, and also then doing it for maintenance operations, going about this, being able to visualize a building before it's actually built. And then more than just seeing it on a CAD screen, or even a 3D model and using BIM, to be able to look at it from a virtual reality aspect right there, it has another sense of dimension to the overall design, and you can actually get good collaboration and end up with something that's going to be worthwhile. Now, a few other areas I just want to kind of commentary on here, some of the things that I see are important working towards. One of them is the idea of a smart grid and smart buildings and how we're working towards that. We have this grand challenge of working toward trying to take a smart grid, the electrical grid we have. The only difference between that, the normal grid and what we might call define a smart grid, the difference is there, besides just power flow and money going back to the utilities, we have this information exchange back and forth, which is shown on kind of on the dotted lines right in there. We have information that's coming from utilities and the electric suppliers, and information is being shared back to the utility by the users right there. Now, the utilities, they've done a pretty good job so far. That's their business. You would expect them working towards a smart grid. And they've done a pretty decent job overall around the world of integrating, renewable energy within their electric supply network. But where we need, work is still needed is basically is the industry that ASHRAE is involved with, the built environment, the buildings, and all the stuff that's inside there. You have electric vehicle charging stations. You have, even getting to the point where you have, a pump or an air handling unit might actually be grid connected and actually be able to communicate back and forth right there. We're getting there, but that's where I think a lot of work is being put. Now, one thing that's really, I think, an important thing to working towards the idea of model predictive control. Model predictive control could apply to an individual piece of equipment. It could be to a building, or it could be an entire campus of buildings, like such my university campus right there. I was just reading an article on ASHRAE's newsletter came out there today, was looking at model predictive control of a particular building and how that was used to make it much more energy efficient at that point. We don't have time to get into that too much, but I would encourage you, if you really like modeling like that point, just Google that term right there. That's beginning to become more and more prevalent within the industry usage right there. So we go from a smart grid. We have the original idea of a smart grid where some parts of it's connected, some parts exchanging. We're evolving into maybe a second generation version of that, where it's more widespread connection and connectivity. And then as we go on, you can actually envision the point where where everything is connected, all the equipment, all the buildings, the equipment inside the buildings is working together. We could even get to the point where you have, a neural grid, or have a self-healing network where a building senses something's gone down, problems occurred in the electric grid nearby, and they were able to help and take care of and route and work from that point. So that's that is something that is potentially coming down here. Now, last little topic I just want to talk about here is just let's get into a few things. Have a healthy building. How do we have healthy building with low energy? That's still getting this idea of low or good indoor air quality. We need to future-proof our building design. Going about this, talking about climate change and how that fits into. We need to be able to verify the performance. We compare that to the promise there of doing the overall design. We got to monitor and verify that. And then resilience. And resilience, I think, is an important term coming about there. It's more important within ASHRAE and the industry. The picture right there showing the New York City subway after Hurricane Sandy hit them 7 or 8 years ago. So how that all that electrical equipment down there has basically been ruined. So divining the resources and the designs, such as adapting to more extreme weather events, more other events that might be coming down the future. How we go about this right there. So what is resilience? In the context of that, it's a capacity of either individuals, communities, businesses, buildings, cities to be able to survive both chronic stresses and acute shocks. Going about this. So chronic stress, on a person, you have a disease, heart disease, diabetes, in a city, it might be inefficient public transport. And in a building, chronic things are, poorly controlled HVAC, bad indoor air quality, air infiltration, air leakage, going about this. And then acute things that occur on, in a person, that person with heart disease, has a heart attack. And a city, an acute thing would be like an extreme weather event, a hurricane that would come through. And in a building, maybe the grid goes down, or the HVAC, HVAC chiller fails. There's an acute shock that has to be taken care of. We have to deal with going about this. All right, well, I hope that was able to people understand and kind of see what you go about this. I realize it's pretty fast doing though, but I hope you took a few things away from that. There's my email address right there. I think I've shared this presentation with the organizers too as well, but we can continue a phone call or an email if you have any kind of questions going about this. And with that, do I need to hit something to unshare my screen? Yeah, there you go. All right. I think that we're back now to the organizer.
Thank you, Dr. Lawrence. What an interesting and informative presentation on ASHRAE's position on climate change, and hopefully some of these changes we can see in our country too, hopefully in the near future. But any questions that you all have for Dr. Lawrence, please feel free to type it in the chat. And now we're moving on to Mr. David Underwood. Just to introduce Mr. Underwood. David Underwood has served ASHRAE for many years at the Chapter Region and Society. He was the founder of Isotherm Engineering Limited and Evaporative Tower Services in Ontario, Canada. He received his engineering degree from the University of Manitoba in 1964. Mr. Underwood is a fellow in ASHRAE. He has received the Distinguished and Outstanding Service Awards in the William J. Collins Award. Mr. Underwood is the 2015-16 presidential member. In his role on the Ontario Provincial Advisory Committee for the Certified Refrigeration Trade, he developed the trade examination and the courses for the development and developed the trade examination courses for refrigeration apprentices and co-authored a safety manual for refrigeration mechanics. For many years, Mr. Underwood was an active part on the B52 Mechanical Refrigeration Code Committee for Canada. He also actively participated in developing the refrigerant management regulation for Ontario. He currently serves on the Model National Building Code Committee. Mr. Underwood has extensive experience in training operators and technicians through his role in commissioning systems as a primary function of our design building firm. Please welcome Mr. David Underwood. Thank you for being here, sir.
Omar, thank you very much for that introduction. I understand you want to talk about ASHRAE's Building Energy Quotient program today. An energy audit is an analysis of energy flows. It is the first step for finding opportunities to reduce energy consumption, expense, and carbon footprint. I'm not able to change the slides. Omar? Hello?
Hi, David. You're on. Let me know if you got access.
The slides are not, there we go. Okay, I think we're going now.
Give me a second.
I'm gonna have to ask you to change the slides.
Okay, I just gave you my keyboard and mouse, so yeah.
Okay.
Cool, perfect.
Try again.
Try again.
No, not going.
Where?
Next slide, please.
Okay.
Energy modeling includes analyzing design options for new buildings or retrofits of existing buildings. It gives estimates for each design option of monthly, annual, and energy consumptions, and monthly and annual energy costs, and payback on these options. Next slide, please. ASHRAE's Building Energy Quotient program provides an energy analysis that compares your building to others in the same climate zone. The two complementary options are in operation, which compares actual building energy use to similar buildings, and the as designed, which compares potential building energy use to similar buildings. The Building EQ can help identify means to improve your building's energy performance and data for indoor environmental quality. This presentation provides details on how to use the Building EQ program as part of new building design and how to manage actual building energy consumption, which is very important because most of our buildings are already built. Next slide, please. Building EQ is powered by ASHRAE and rests on ASHRAE methodologies, standards, and experience of credentialed practitioners. The Building EQ provides the most comprehensive assessment program in our industry and gives reliable, consistent results. Next slide, please. Our new ASHRAE headquarters renovations will be assessed using our as-designed rating. After 12 months, an in-operation rating will be completed. In both cases, ASHRAE objective is for zero rating, that is a net zero energy use. This photo shows the entrance to our new headquarters building located in Atlanta, Georgia. The benefits of the program include it helps building owners make informed decisions about managing their building portfolios. It assists in the preparation of an ASHRAE Level 1 energy audit. And the Building EQ identifies actionable recommendations, provides a credentialed practitioner with a consistent methodology, and it provides the building owner with clear information. Next slide, please. Okay. Building EQ is a web-based portal that compares your building performance with similar building types in the same climate zone, and it can compare buildings within an owner's portfolio against each other. It shows changes over time to measure expected energy savings and performance results. It helps owners to invest financial resources that will provide the greatest return. The Building EQ is the only tool that includes both an in-operation or operational rating and an as-designed or asset rating. Taken together, the as-designed and in-operation ratings provide a comprehensive view of a building's current and potential energy performance. Most of the inputs are the same for both ratings, which saves you time when inputting the information. The building EQ operation process compares metered energy use to a baseline median energy use intensity. 12 consecutive months of actual meter data is required and must be within 6 months of that assessment date. Metered energy data can be downloaded from Energy Star Portfolio Manager, so the data does not need to be re-entered into the portal. The scale barometer illustrates how a building performance score indicates energy performance within a range as follows. A zero net energy building will score 0. An efficient building scores less than 100. An average building will fall near the median value of 100. The baseline value of 100 represents the average energy use intensity for existing buildings of that building type. An inefficient building has a score greater than 100. Next slide, please. Building EQ in operation assesses the building's energy performance by collecting metered energy data, including a building walkthrough, supporting a level 1 ASHRAE energy audit, identifying where and how energy is consumed, providing suggested energy efficiency measures with estimated costs and payback, and includes an indoor environmental screening that records measurements for thermal comfort, lighting, ventilation for IAQ, and providing a building EQ performance score. The assessor gets information that will help the building owner. The building owner receives guidance on how to improve energy performance. The building EQ in operation process compares metered energy use to a baseline median The building EQ as designed compares a building's simulated energy consumption to a baseline EUI. It utilizes a standardized model of the building being evaluated, uses standardized inputs of operating parameters, including occupancy, plug-in process loads, schedules, set points dependent on the building and space type. Because most green building programs don't normalize for operating and occupancy variables in their new construction ratings, it is difficult to compare buildings with very different operation and occupancy to each other. The building EQ as design rating allows for this comparison because it standardizes those operating variables. The scale barometer shown illustrates building performance score again as follows: with a zero net energy building will have a score of 0. An efficient building has a score less than 100, and an average building will fall near the median value of 100, and an inefficient building has a score greater than 100. These are the standardized modeling inputs specified in the Building EQ Worksheet tab. I'll give you a moment to take a look at them. Next, please. Modeling inputs are specific to the candidate building. These inputs need to be consistent with as-built conditions. Again, I'll give you a moment to take a look at these items. Next, please. The as-designed process involves an on-site visit by a building energy modeling professional, known as a BEMP, to confirm that the modeling inputs are consistent with the building as constructed. The process models the building using standardized operating assumptions and modeling inputs, as I've stated before, calculates the rating using data generated from the model, allows for comparison of buildings with different operating parameters, and allows for comparisons of a building's current energy efficiency to the building's potential energy efficiency. The owner is able to compare different buildings without including effects of the current occupants. The operator is able to determine whether they are achieving the full design potential for their buildings. The as-designed rating may be a useful tool for real estate transactions. The as-designed rating can be used on new buildings that have not yet been operational for a full 12 months, as well as on existing buildings that have been operating for a long time. The as-designed process can also be applied during the design phase of construction or to evaluate different design options. Because the as-designed rating is neutralized for occupancy and operating conditions, the design options can be compared solely based on how the building assets like bricks and mortars and systems are expected to perform. Note, the rating and score cannot be finalized or awarded until the building is fully constructed and the as-built conditions are finalized. Next slide, please. Information on state and local ratings in North America and Canada is available from the Building Rating website supported by the Institute for Market Transformation. Other websites including this kind of information are the EPA Energy Star, the Department of Energy or DOE Asset Score, the US GBC LEED Program, Green Globes, and BOMA 360. The European Union requirements for each country are under a directive of the European Parliament. Member states are obliged to ensure that when buildings are constructed, sold, or rented, an energy certificate is made available to the owner by the owner to the tenant or potential buyer. The certificate shall also include information on how to improve energy performance. I seem to have somebody else in the background. It concerns such elements as building envelope, windows, electrical and ventilation installations, lighting, heat sources, which is not too important for people in Trinidad, I'm sure, cooling systems and others. However, I am from Canada, so heating is important to us. Certain building costs over 500 square meters are also required to have an energy certificate on public display. This can be for an asset rating or an operational rating of the building. Building EQ allows for the comparison of a building's actual energy use to a building's potential energy use. Both Building EQ and Energy Star benchmark your building against a baseline of other similar buildings. Building EQ is a statistical scale that compares the building score to a baseline median score. Energy Star is a pass-fail and uses a percentile scale where a score of 75 means that the building is better than 75% of other similar buildings. The Building EQ assessment assists with the preparation of an ASHRAE Level 1 energy audit to identify improvements for the building. These actionable recommendations are generated by a credentialed professional with a site visit and recorded measurements. In contrast, the U.S. Department of Energy Asset Score has no credential requirements. The tool automatically generates building improvement suggestions. This makes the quality of the suggestions somewhat uncertain. Next, please. The Building EQ portal is a tool that includes online data entry, and this is the heart of the Building EQ information input. The Building EQ performance score rates the building's performance and is free to all users. The portal gives the Building EQ performance score, which shows on the screen once the required data is entered. Projects must be submitted by a credentialed practitioner for an official Building EQ rating. A credentialed practitioner signs off on the project by agreeing to the terms and conditions and signing off on the project detail screen. Credentialed users include ASHRAE Building Assessment Professionals, or BEAPs, ASHRAE Building Energy Management Professionals, or BEMPs, or a professional engineer located in the area of the project. The Building EQ portal allows you to group the projects in your account into campuses and portfolios. You can use these two designations to organize and group your projects. The Copy Project feature creates a new project with the exact same information as the original file. The new file is automatically created with Copy 1 added to the end of the original file name. The new project can be renamed and edited as needed. This feature can be used to copy any project at any time during the data entry process or after the project has been submitted. This feature could be used to update a previously submitted project with new utility, energy efficiency measures, and/or indoor environmental quality information. You can create an as-designed project for a building that has previously been submitted as an in-operation project, but needs to have some different information added. The feature could also be used to enter historical data on a building without having to update the static building information with each new project. Next, please. The metrics, currency type, and rating type are selected from the Manage Project page. The climate zone is selected on the data input screen. And this is a great thing for ASHRAE's international situation. We have languages of English, French, or Spanish, which are selected for the user on the user setup page. So we have different languages available for the program. The data input screens are arranged by tabs and accordions. The tabs, building characteristics, energy, indoor environmental quality screening, energy efficiency measures, and photos and attachments are organized horizontally across the screen. Each tab has multiple accordions below it vertically that open and close. A green check mark on the accordion indicates that all the required data for that accordion has been successfully entered and saved. The Building EQ portal uses several different symbols to communicate the validation status of your project. The question mark indicates that there is a help screen associated with the field or a tab that will provide specific guidance relative to that field or tab. The yellow triangle is a validation warning that signals that an entered value is outside the normally expected parameters for that field. A message will appear in yellow text at the top of the accordion to let you know what specific field is triggering this warning. The warning allows you to verify that you have entered the information correctly. Validation warnings will not prevent you from submitting your project for approval. A red X mark signifies a validation error indicating that either information is missing or that an entered value is invalid. And a project cannot be submitted for approval until all validation errors have been addressed. Available building types are noted in the pull-down menus. They are listed by broad activities and broken down into more specific building types. They match your building's main use activities with the broader categories and then more specifically within the subcategories. A multiple use building contains different principal activities in a single building. Similarly, a multiple use property can contain different buildings. A candidate building may be rated as a multiple use building or property using the rules detailed in the definitions included on the main help screen. The baseline median EUI for lab buildings uses a calculation methodology that accounts for multiple lab types, hours of operation, and the lab area ratio. Existing methodologies and other programs do not distinguish between different lab types or the percentage of lab area in a lab building. Management reports generated by the Building EQ tool include a label report, a disclosure report, a spreadsheet audit report, and a narrative audit report. The building EQ reports for credentialed users submissions include a label report, which is free at any time, a disclosure report for a $50 fee, a spreadsheet audit report also for a $50 fee, and a narrative audit report for a $200 fee. The Building EQ Label Report is a graphic presentation of Building EQ Performance Score and is free to credentialed users for approved submission. It can be used to create a building plaque. It is a calculated Building EQ Performance Score is visible at the top of the portal page at all times. The Building EQ Performance Score provides an indicator of how the building is performing with additional information produced during the assessment. This allows for a conversation with the building owner on how to improve the building's energy performance. The in-operation assessment is based on actual energy costs, resonates with decision makers, and provides actionable recommendations for improvement. The as-designed evaluation is based on a standardized model of the building, provides additional information for decision makers, and indicates the building's potential energy performance. The Building Disclosure Report presents a summary of the building's energy use and Building EQ Performance Score. Provides energy use information for compliance with disclosure ordinances in various locales. Is suitable for real estate and transactions and energy disclosure. Information on a building's energy use is the critical first step in making the necessary changes and choices to reduce energy use and costs. The Building EQ and Operation Assessment process focuses on the building's metered energy use for the preceding 12 to 18 months. Includes a collection of information that aligns with an ASHRAE Level 1 energy audit, helps in the preparation of an ASHRAE Level 1 energy audit report, and provides building owners with building-specific energy savings measures with estimated costs and payback information that can be used to improve the building's energy performance. Next, please. ASHRAE 211 includes a normative language standard for energy audits, a consistent approach to these audits, and raises and maintains the bar for energy audits. The basic parts of a Level 1 energy audit include energy use analysis, a review of monthly energy bills and utility information, a walkthrough survey, identification of low-cost to no-cost energy improvement measures, estimated costs and savings, summary of special problems and needs. The Building EQ and Operation Assessment provides a consistent process for evaluating a building's energy use and identifies actionable recommendations of energy efficiency measures that can be used to improve energy performance and allows owners to benchmark their buildings and reassess after improvements have been made to the building. Next, please. The Building EQ Narrative Audit Report includes a template for an ASHRAE Level 1 Energy Audit Report in MS Word format. ASHRAE Standard 211 reporting requirements. It is auto-populated with all the information collected during an in-operation assessment, and additional information is entered by the user. Specific ways to this report to make it useful include it provides a recommended text and boilerplate language to assist the user in preparing a comprehensive Level 1 energy audit report. It has audit-specific information populated from the Building EQ portal that fills in the tables in this report. The MS Word format can be edited as needed by the user, and the users can add or delete information based on what they wish to include in this report. It can also be customized by adding appropriate letterhead or logos. In summary, the building EQ performs both in operation and as design ratings, which help make bad buildings good and good buildings great. These tools are flexible for managing large portfolios of buildings and users, and they align with ASHRAE Standard 211 Level 1 energy audits, which makes it easy to deliver both a benchmark and an energy audit, and allow for consistent benchmarking and audit formats. The value of building EQ includes streamlining and improving the audit process, a standardized and consistent process for tracking improvements over time, providing a building EQ performance score to benchmark a building. The value also includes comparing a building's performance score to other buildings, detailing actionable recommendations to improve a building's performance, and providing documentation of these results. Access the Building EQ portal at ASHRAE.org, and questions can also be sent to the Building EQ at ASHRAE.org. And check it all out. And the last slide is information to get to me. So you're going to go 1, 2 more. If you've got any questions, please feel free to contact me at this email address. I'd be very happy to answer any questions that people may have, or if we've got time now, I'll take some questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, David. What a wonderful presentation that you just did. Any questions that anyone has, you are feel free to type it in the chat, and we will just take a couple minutes. Anybody, if anyone has any questions, can type it up. Thank you.
Hi, David. Hope all is well. Just must say that it was quite an interesting presentation. Very detailed. One quick question. What is the qualifications to get your BEMP certification or BAPE certification?
That's there's a couple of items involved there. It's basically looking at somebody who has experience in the industry and has some real understanding of doing energy modeling or energy assessments. It's looking at a broad base of knowledge. It's not a specific examination from a specific set of courses. There's a whole series of publications that are listed on the ASHRAE website. For more detailed information on that, you really need to go to ASHRAE.org, because that's where all that information is located.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Kumar, are you there?
Yes, Kieran, I'm there.
All right, cool. No problem.
So now I would like to forward you over to my vice president, actually, of the ASHRAE Trinidad Student Chapter, Mr. Jerome George Nicholas, and he will give us our closing remarks and our vote of thanks. Jerome, if you may.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the ASHRAE Trinidad Student Chapter, I'd like to thank the guest speakers, Andy Prasad Maharaj, Thomas Lawrence, Dr. David Underwood, and Devanan Ragbir for the insightful and informative presentations. As well, I'd like to thank Mr. George Nicholson, ASHRAE CARICOM President, and all other attendees for their time and attention. Everyone stay safe and enjoy the rest of your day. And once again, thanks for your time.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks once again, David. Thanks, Dev. Thanks, Andy. And thanks, Tom. The presentations are really good. And I hope you guys can join us tomorrow for our coronavirus and indoor air quality talk also.
Thank you.
Thanks.